Bill Payne, what an absolute pleasure to meet you. How are you?
Oh, very well, Sandy. Thank you.
That's great. It's terrific to have your company. Of course, like everybody else around the world, I grew up listening to the music of Little Feat, so I'm very excited to be chatting with you and find out how it all began and where you're at these days.
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate it. Where are you, in fact? Are you in Sydney or
In Melbourne.
Melbourne?
Yeah. You haven't been here for a while, have you?
I have not. Although I spent a lot of time there with Shane Howard and
Ah, of
Kroger and a
course.
bunch of Sam C and a bunch of folks.
Of course.
Marcy.
Actually, we just saw Shane Howard last week performing. They were doing, I think it was the 40th anniversary tour they were on. And wow, they sound just as good today as they did back in the day.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get to see you back down here again.
I hope so too. I've been there 10 times, so
Oh.
not shy. So we'll see what happens.
Good, fingers crossed. Bill, you're considered by many rock pianists, including Sir Elton John, to be one of the finest American piano, rock, and blues musicians in the world. I know that you formed Little Feat in 1969, but what were you doing before that?
Um, I was in Santa Maria, California, which is Central California. Um, I'd grown up playing piano, taking lessons in Ventura, which is south of there, about 100 miles. Um, but at age 15, I had been going back from Santa Maria to Ventura to take lessons with Ruth Newman. And Ruth passed away. She had a heart attack. And so I was pretty distraught. And my parents, after an incident where I got pretty drunk with a friend of mine and a lot of trouble. And as they're driving me back to Santa Maria, my mother says, "There's uh, a lady who called from the school. Her son wants you to audition to play in a band." I said, "Really? Okay." So I did the audition, but I went over there to audition to play drums. And they had a piano up against the wall in the room and I just casually walked over there and started playing. Didn't even sit down, and they go, "Hang on a second, you play the piano?" And I go, I guess." They said, "Forget this band. We have another one down the street. They're called the Debonaires. We got a keyboard for you." Boom! I was off and running. I've been in bands ever since. So I'm
Wow.
73. I've
So,
been in bands since 15 years of age.
how amazing. So there was nothing else on your sight in your eye line to become, was there? It was once you were in, you were a muso for life.
Yeah, I mean, the only job I had other than playing music was as a paper boy, delivering
How,
paper. So that was
and
it.
right. And how come you traveled 100 miles for piano lessons? That seems rather um, grand,
Well, it
stupid.
was
No, no,
extreme.
rather large. I mean, that's a long way to go. Weren't there any piano teachers in your local neighbourhood?
Not like Ruth. When I was a kid, I mean, she said, "I'll teach Bill how to read music, but let's not take the magic out of it for him," which meant let him play by ear as well.
All right. Wow,
And
that
not a
makes a
lot,
big difference, doesn't it?
yeah, not a lot of teachers did that. I also took pipe organ from Ruth at a Presbyterian church, which was across the street from her, and I'd fill in from her when I was like, I don't know, 11, 12 years of age. And that whole business took me away from religion because I was playing for every church in town. "Hey, Mom, why do the Lutherans say we're going to hell and the Methodists say we're going to hell too? What's going on there?" So, so I was out surfing, is what I was doing in between playing music. And but yeah, no. In fact, I'm writing a book about all this, and I'm centering in on what it was that Ruth taught me. I mean, this is the church I was talking about, this Presbyterian Community Church,
Right, right.
and there was oh, she had a series of notebooks that I check out. So we were, these sort of handwritten notes that Ruth would do. All my literature for keyboard is here. And there's over
All on
that
paper. How
a
amazing.
lot of stuff. So yeah, that's which is one reason when I auditioned for that band, I didn't even think of like, yeah, I play keyboards and let's rock and roll. I mean, I did know how to play, and I wasn't strictly a classical player either. Uh, so it was just one of those things that 2 plus 2 did not equal 4 for me at the time.
Yeah. And she'd given you the freedom to express yourself on the keyboards, which, as you said, a lot of piano teachers at the time didn't do. I mean, I remember having classical lessons that were so rigidly locked into pieces of music and learning to read that there was no room for self-expression whatsoever.
Exactly. And one of my concerts I did quite a few years ago now, but it was a solo concert. And I asked the audience, I said, how many of you out there play piano? And they, yeah, yeah. And I said, how many were hit on the knuckles with a ruler when you were learning to play? They go, whoa. And I go, that's not a great way to teach a child to do anything, do you think?
Yeah.
And so I wasn't. I was, pampered and
Uh, almost.
but I had to deliver to Ruth too. I mean, I couldn't just like slough things off. She, like any great teacher, she taught me how to get around the keyboard, um, how to read, but also mainly how to focus in on what was important with touch, with with learning a voice, uh, all of that, which I then put together pretty quickly playing with these bands.
Yeah, well, it certainly stood you in good stead. How did the Debonaires go as a band?
Uh, the interesting thing was this guy named Bob Pierce, who was the fellow that had all the gear. The very first person the band wanted to fire was Bob Pierce. I'm saying, what are we doing that for? And I thought, okay, this is like Hollywood, welcome to Hollywood, I guess. Years later, not that many years later, when I joined Little Feat, um, I was at, Lowell said, look, Lowell George said, I want you to play on this record of Richie Hayward's with this Fraternity of Man. Um, for viewers out there that may not know the Fraternity of Man, they were in a movie called was Jack Nicholson um, and Peter Fonda. It was a huge movie. Now I can't remember the name of it, but
I'll find it.
Easy Rider.
Easy Rider, of course.
So Easy Rider. Richie's band had a song in their boat. Don't bogart that joint. So I said, well, okay, Law, yeah, I'll play on this record. It's the second album of theirs. But I thought Richie was in our band. He goes, no, yeah, he is. You're gonna make the record with them. Then they're going to split up, and then we'll start Little Feat. I went, oh, once again, welcome to Hollywood. So
you've just taken me way back. Don't bogart that joint was certainly an expression that we all used way back then, wasn't it? Haven't heard that in years.
The way back.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were one of the co-founders of Little Feat. Tell us about that with Lowell.
I'd initially gone up north, which is probably the question you wanted me to answer before, but I'd gone up to the San Francisco Bay Area to see if there were any bands up there that I might join. And this is in 1969, so I would have been 20 years old. And I found one group that had everything but talent. They were drug dealers, basically. So they had all the gear, a house that used to, the Big Brother and the Holding Company, Janis Joplin's band used to stay at. But I can't play with these guys. So there was an album called Uncle Meat, which was by Frank Zappa, and I was listening to it and going, those are the people I want to play with. I want to play with Frank Zappa. So I got in touch with Warner's. Frank had 2 labels there. One was called Bizarre, and the other was Straight. I called Bizarre.
Of course you did.
Yeah, exactly. And they go, well, Frank is going to Europe, but I'm truncating the story slightly. There's a guy named Lowell George, and we could see if the 2 of you can hit it off or talk at least and see what's there. And this took several calls because I mean I wasn't anybody at that time. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't know who I was. So it was really just with a phony calling card, making long distance calls to people for free, which is about the only way I can do it. This is from Isla Vista, which is just north of Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And of course, telephone calls in those days were so expensive too.
they were. So I got in touch with Lowell finally, and we met, and nothing was decided other than the fact that we'd get together again. And
So just before you go on, Lowell was actually part of Frank Zappa's band at that time, wasn't he?
he was. I don't know that he actually was a member of the Mothers. That's all. That's been a debate for a long time.
Oh.
But he had a song called "Willin'," purportedly that Frank said, "Look, I think you ought to start your own band." I don't think Frank liked the drug reference in it, but he knew Lowell was exceedingly talented. He suggested that he form his own group. Just about that time was when I entered the picture, and we hit it off. And I eventually did meet Frank, but I never auditioned to play with the Mothers. By the time I met Frank, which was about a month later, maybe even a little longer, I'd made the commitment to be a part of this band with Lowell, and we didn't even have a name for it yet. So it wasn't Little Feat; it was Lyle Gleep or whoever it was.
Unnamed. What was it about Frank Zappa that made you want to reach out to him in the first place? Why did you decide that that was the band you wanted to play with?
The music was adventurous. It wasn't rock and roll. It was
kind of freestyle, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And the very first material that we wrote with Little Feat was more along those lines too. So what do we have? A Dance of the Nubile Virgin Slaves was one of our first songs. And we played it for Ahmet Erdogan, Lowell and I did. Now, Ahmet was a producer for many people, not the least of which was Ray Charles, which I didn't know, or I would have been too embarrassed to show him the song. But he heard a few things that we'd come up with. He says, boys, it's too diverse. So we went back to the drawing board and started writing what was going to be on the very first Little Feat record. And you can tell by the titles themselves just how eclectic everything. We did Brides of Jesus, Hamburger Midnight, Strawberry Flats, I've Been the One. I mean, this goes on and on. And yeah, the titles were eclectic, the music was eclectic, but it was a combination of rock and roll, of country, a little bit of R&B, and just we were finding our voice. So it was a very exciting time. This is in 1970.
Right. Were you all on drugs writing those songs?
I don't know if we were on drugs writing them, but we were on drugs skateboarding and riding our bikes. No, it was that era there. I mean, between drugs and free sex and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think that's how they called it.
They sure do. Those were the days.
Yeah, they were. People ask me, they go, Sandy, was it really that crazy back then? I said, yeah, times 100. It was nuts. So
but nuts in a good way.
Overall, yeah. Overall, there was. We had a discussion with Terry Melcher, Lowell and I did, before signing with Warner's. And Terry was on his way over to Europe the next morning. He says, hey, when I get back, let's talk about putting a deal together with you guys and this and that. Well, the day that he left, I believe the La Bianca family was murdered. They were not that far from Lowell's place. And then that terrible tragedy that happened with, what the movie was about with Sharon Tate and everything. Those horrible murders of Charles Manson and his crew. Of
course. Yeah, that was all around that time.
Guess what? They were looking for Terry Melcher.
Really?
Yes, because he didn't offer Charles Manson a record deal. So he basically put a death warrant out on the guy, and all these other people died as a result of that. That's so when I say it was crazy in a good way, and it was certainly crazy in a horrific way as well.
I never knew that Charles Manson had wanted a record deal. Never knew he'd seen himself as a as a musician.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that certainly didn't come out in the movie.
No, it did not. But there's, with any movie, it's the
Fictionalized.
movies. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
the movie.
of course. Of course. So you start Little Feat with Lowell in 1969. You write this crazy first album that's taken off amazingly well. Where did you get the name Little Feat from anyway?
From the Mothers, there's the drummer from the Mothers, Jimmy Carl Black, uh, who called himself the Indian of the band, um, which would not be what he described himself nowadays. But he was looking at Lowell's feet, which were these huaraches, these sandals, and they were almost wide as they were long. They looked like hobbit feet. Lowell, you have these little effing feet there, and so Lowell took the little in the feet, turned the F-E-E-T into F-E-A-T, probably all of the Beatles, and there we were.
Wow, I never knew that story either. How incredible. How small were Lowell's feet? Obviously very small.
Yeah, very small. I think, I don't know, mine were probably smaller, but
You never worn them
Jimmy
in
wasn't looking at my
sandals.
feet either. So, but yeah, yeah, Lowell's an incredible human being. So we were.
Tell us, I mean, before we move on, of course, you've lost him fairly recently. What was he like? I mean, you were obviously enamored with him and with his talent. Could you describe him a bit?
Yeah, Lowell George, when I met him in '69, was maybe the best way to describe him is the the house that he lived in. When I drove up to his house, um, which was near Silver Lake, which is heading towards East LA, and it was in a rustic neighborhood. The house itself was rustic. It was just off. It wasn't right up against the street. It was set back a little bit, encased with trees and whatnot. The door was open. I walked up. There's this beautiful uh, blonde girl, and she's listening cross-legged to Eric Satie. And she goes, "Oh, you must be Bill." I said, "Yeah, yeah, hi, hi." She goes, "Lowell's expecting you. He'll be back in 4 or 5 hours." I said, "What does he do when he's not expecting you?"
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. So I walk into the house. I'm like, okay. On the very back wall was a samurai sword. To the right of that, down below, on the right-hand corner, was a sitar. Apparently, he was taking sitar lessons with Rabbi Shankar.
Right.
He had a great record collection with Ohm and maybe another John Coltrane record. He had some blues albums with Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. Uh, there was his book collection was some poetry with Allen Ginsberg. And there's one other guy. I can never remember his name. I'm looking for his book right now as we speak. Uh,
Don't worry. So I
yeah,
mean, so you had plenty of time to hang around the house and discover everything he had there.
yeah. So by the time he showed up, I almost felt like I kind of knew him, and we discussed everything under the sun, and we decided, let's get together in a couple of weeks and we'll start writing, which we did, and it took off from there. So, but it took a year, almost a year, to land a bass player. We must have auditioned 14 bass players the first year.
Why was that so hard?
The music was difficult. Our standards were a certain thing that we wanted, and we wound up finally getting Roy Estrada, who played bass with the Mothers. So he joined us for 2 albums, which was Little Feat and Sailing Shoes. Sailing Shoes, by the way, next year is Warner's is re-releasing.
I know I want to get to that. I'm absolutely. It's very exciting. So what was the writing process like for the two of you? Did you obviously got on well as writers as well as people?
Yeah, I think initially we did, and I think one of the better things we co-wrote in the beginning was a song called Truck Stop Girl. The Truck Stop Girl was recorded by the Byrds, so that was pretty nice to have those guys cut the tune. Um, Bill all had Willin, which he had cut before we formed Little Feat, and it was on the very first record as well. So if people listen to that, it's to me, I'm kind of feeding you what I think it is, but it sounds like a caricature of what a truck driver would be and what country music is.
Uh-huh.
So by the time that we re-recorded it for Sailing Shoes, we had the Floyd Kramer-esque piano on it. It was a lot more like a country song, and I think that's really what gave that tune, what turned that song into the iconic song that it is.
Yeah.
Is that version of it, and we took it from there. But we took the song a little more seriously than he did on his recording of it.
Right. I'm chatting with Little Feat's Bill Payne. What about if we get to 1973 and the album Dixie Chicken?
Yes.
That was has that been the biggest selling album to date?
Well, at that period of time, perhaps the first two albums, I don't think sold 20, maybe 23,000 records between the two of them. I think Little Feat sold 11,000 albums. Possibly we sold 13,000 of Sailing Shoes. So not great successes on that level. They were very successful along the line of introducing a new band and to Warner's, and it was a compliment to us to be there and for Warner's as well, because we were attracting people to come to the label because, hey, they've got Little Feat, they must be pretty cool.
So despite not huge record sales, you were building up this groundswell, weren't you? You were building a cult following that
yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Well said. So Dixie Chicken, we had lost to Captain Beefheart, Roy Estrada, and Roy decided to join Beefheart's band. He was, from the get-go, he was never really locked into working with us for whatever reason. And finally we were able to say, okay, we'll do something else. So we brought in Paul Brer to play guitar. This is Richie and I going down to a loft in Los Angeles. We found Paul. We knew of him anyway because he actually, out of those 14 bass players, he was one of them. And at any rate, so.
But he hadn't been the one that you'd chosen off the bat.
No, he told Lowell, he said, Lowell, I don't play the bass. And Lowell said, well, it's two less strings than a guitar. Like, that's going to help you. So there's the attitude right there. What happened was our road manager, Rick Harper, knew Ken and Barry. They were the guys that operated SIR, which is a famous studio instrument rentals. I think they're all over the world, but they weren't at that time. They were just in Los Angeles. But they told Rick about a guy named Kenny Gradney, who was coming out of a group called Delaney and Bonnie.
All right.
So he was available. Would we want to have him audition? So we did. He auditioned with me. He was fabulous. And I went, oh my gosh, this is great. So during one of our rehearsals, we were getting set to go over to Hawaii to play the Crater Festival. He says, I want to bring my partner in. We go, oh, who's that? It's a guy named Sam Clayton. And Clayton played drums, or played congas and percussion. So Sam comes in, and we all go over to Hawaii and play to 40,000 people over there. And Sam's been in the band ever since, and so is Kenny. So they were locked in from the minute they got into the group, and it's just been a hell of a ride. What can I tell you?
Yeah, and you started. I mean, then you started gaining more and more popularity. The cult following turned into a mainstream following, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it had the edges of cult attached to it for a long time. Unlike the Doobie Brothers, who I've been working with up until last October of last year, 2021. Um, I worked with the Doobies for 7 years, right? But I played on all their very early records. They were a hit band and what you'd call a commercially successful band, right? Little Feat never had any hit records. We had records that radio would play, but it was sort of like maybe we had a guy that liked us in New York or Philadelphia, but they didn't know anything about us in Tucson, Arizona. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So it took a while. It took a while for us to get there. Doobie Brothers sold millions of records. We wound up selling a million at one point, but
So did
they
that disappoint you? And I mean, and why
not
do you
really.
think that was?
To answer your first question, no, it did not disappoint me. I think that the music took a little getting acquainted with. Things did not pop out and grab people by the throat and say, "Come on, let's go." Uh, "Oh, Atlanta" was a song that I wrote that a few albums later, and by about that time, we were starting to, again, not with hit records, but just with notoriety, accomplish a lot of great things. Um, but yeah, I've always felt like Little Feat. The reason we're still around 50 plus years later is maybe because we were not a hit record band. We've got a great catalog of music that we still play. We're still writing. Um, I've been writing with some really good people over here in the States. Um, I don't know what to say. It's people that try and play Little Feat's music. They go, well, it's like, and I go, harder than you thought. They go, yeah. I go, well, we didn't do that to trip you up. It was just that there's a lot of, like the Grateful Dead, like a lot of bands, there's a lot of detail in our music. It takes real musicians and musicianship to play it. Groups like Fish, they've done a great job with it. Uh, there's a singular guy that Don Was, he's played our music. Um, he was one of those guys that said, yeah, it's a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But
And you, I'm sorry, go on.
Don knew what he was doing. It was just that it kind of, it wasn't something you could just sit down and start playing. You really had to think about it.
Yeah. And you must have made a conscious decision to remain faithful to the music that you wanted to play. You never became swayed by trying to make the music more commercially what's the word? Inviting, I guess.
Well, we did, um, but when you try, it doesn't always work. So it's you everything kind of has to click at once. I mean, starting with not only the song, but who is singing it. I mean, Lowell was a terrific singer, but Lowell was starting to think that the music itself. This is from a quote of his, that it was because it took a while for people to, you really had to listen to it, right, to get into it. Uh, that may have put the brakes on for a lot of people. Also, if you had the kind of eclectic music that we had, it wasn't easy for a record label to say, okay, here's a glass case we're going to sell to people.
They couldn't pigeonhole you.
No, they couldn't. So that made it difficult as well. And we didn't seem to really care that much about it. We were out playing music and working to our own standards. And like you said, Elton John, Sir Elton John, I think he's a pretty good keyboard player. And
You
that's two
certainly,
hours.
you sure
So,
are.
yeah,
And
I take some satisfaction in that.
yeah, and Little Feat, of course, had the reputation of being one of the best live bands around.
Yeah, and the album that signified that to a great degree was "Waiting for Columbus." Um, a few weeks ago, I was in Nashville, and I was there to play the Americana Music Awards. Lyle Lovett wanted to sing "Willin'," and they asked if I would play it with him, and Don Was playing the bass, and Larry Campbell. bunch of friends were there to play. And but the evening before, I was out to dinner with our manager and his assistant, and I went as I was going to the restroom. I saw Robert Plant having dinner, and I thought, oh, I should go over and say hello to him. But I waited. I came back downstairs and I walked, and I could tell Robert's going, oh no, I have to talk to this guy. Who is it? And I said, Robert, it's Bill Payne from Little Feat. And he about jumped out of his chair and go, oh my God, it's so great to see you. he was he was very happy to see me, and as I was him. But we had never really met. And but he had worked with Richie Hayward, our drummer. Richie toured with Robert. Uh, Led Zeppelin was always a very tight with Little Feat as well, as were the Stones from time to time. So we had a lot of good people that were in our corner. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but difficult not to be. I don't want to say jealous, but jealous. Difficult not to compare yourself to all of these bands that were hugely commercially successful. How did that feel for you? Or you were really happy in your niche and rolling on like that?
I was happy with it, and I always played with other bands. I recorded a lot of stuff over the years with a lot of people. I played on hundreds of albums, so I wasn't for lacking in work, uh, for that matter. So there's other things other than that kind of success. I mean, uh, when one of the reasons that Lowell passed away at age 34 was his wellness for one, but there was a lot of drugs back then that were getting in the way of not only just Lowell, but Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, on and on. Because it's a very familiar story, right?
Yeah.
So that I had that discussion with Lowell. Was look, we take 2 steps forward, 3 back, 1 forward, maybe another 2 forward. Now we're 4 back. You can't build on success if you're a moving target, even within your own system. I thought Lowell was exceedingly talented. He could have, would have, should have, but this is where we were. So I mean, I never took it as an affront either way. I mean, in terms of jealousy or anything else. I wound up after he passed away in 1979, working with James Taylor, with Jackson Browne, Stevie Nicks, uh, Bonnie Raitt, Emmylou Harris. I worked with a lot of people.
Yeah. So you've certainly been successful in your own right, totally along the way. 79 then, as a result of Lowell's death, saw the end of Little Feat for a while. And as you said, you played as a member of various bands, touring and as a session artist also. What brought you back together again?
We decided we were invited by a rehearsal hall actually called The Alley. It was in North Hollywood. Little Feat, Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, we all used to rehearse there. We had an unlisted number, which is a great way to do business, I guess. And they said, we're commemorating a room to Lowell, but also Little Feat, which includes Lowell. Would you guys inaugurate it for us? So we said, sure. Well, we tried something very similar with a different set of circumstances to play, but I talked to Paul Barrera, and I said, if we ever do this again, let's just do it amongst ourselves. We'll get whomever we need to help set up gear, but let's not invite people to hear us play. Let's simply get together and play, which we did. Well, that adventure in that room at the Alley, Paul and I were talking about on the drive back. I was getting set to go out on the road with Bob Seger for about 9 months. And I said, I know we couldn't remember all the songs. It was like singing Christmas carols, da 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 da. Now what do we do? That kind of thing. So I said, well, I think we really ought to consider putting Little Feat back together. We still sound like Little Feat. don't we? And he goes, yeah. Um, let's figure out who we want to, if we want to bring in anybody else to sing. I want to line up management. Well, the photo over your right shoulder has the Beatles, right?
Huh?
The guy that I approached to manage us was Peter Asher, who was a part of.
And we know Peter Ash is a friend of this program. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so Peter was, and I've done work with him. There's a photo of Peter and a group from Santa Maria that I was in when he was in town working with Peter and Gordon.
Right.
I was maybe 16, maybe 17 years of age. I didn't know. I mean, I knew Peter Asher from Peter and Gordon, but and we kind of laughed about it later when we actually did get to know one another. But
Right.
He was a fabulous manager. He's still just a wonderful human being. If I can get in touch with him, I will. But I'll say we haven't talked to him in quite a while.
I just read of him lately that he was recovering from a brain injury in hospital from brain cancer. I think. Yeah.
What happened was he had fallen. He had a concussion when he was in London. The doctor said, "Okay, we're good to go." And I don't know if it was weeks later or months later, but whatever. He was losing the ability to play the guitar, and he was having trouble walking, I believe.
Wow.
They went to the doctors again. This time, I think they let him go, and they called him up in a panic, and they said, turn around, get back here. We're going to do brain surgery right now."
Wow.
So they put 3 or 4 holes, drilled 3 or 4 holes in his skull. And Peter, who is one of the calmest people on the planet I think I've ever met, in the quote that was given, because there's a book coming out on him next week if it's not already released down there. And he just said, my mortality, I've never worried about it. I am who I am. My father was a doctor, and so I believed in science. He was one of those guys.
Amazing.
And, he is an amazing.
But he's coming good now, yeah.
I hope so. That's why I want to try and reach out to him. I got a couple of ways to figure out where he is.
Yeah. So. And Bill Payne, when Lowell died, was it automatically the end of Little Feat? I mean, how did the band respond to his death?
We were in the middle of recording Down on the Farm, the album Down on the Farm, and let's see, Lowell was he went out on his solo tour, of which Fred Tackett was one of the people that toured with him. Fred is in our group now, and he wrote a song for Dixie Chicken, which is called oh man, I can't think of the name of it.
Isn't it great getting older?
Yeah, it is. It's funny because even when I was like in my 30s and 40s, I would have the same sort of. So
yeah, I think, blanks. Yeah, me too.
It's definitely different now. I mean, this is a phone, right? Okay, good. Fool Yourself was the name of the song that Fred was involved in. And Peter is 78 years old, by the way. He was born 44. I was born 49. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we as writing this memoir is, it's difficult to write anyway and write well, but to remember. I was talking to Pete Hamill once. Pete was a wonderful writer, a journalist, and he says, writing is the art of remembering, and indeed it is. But what we remember is the key to it, and it's okay not to remember. It's not a matter of remembering names and stuff. It's remembering things that you actually thought happened and they didn't. That kind of thing. What do they call that? The Mandela principle or the Mandela effect, whatever it is, where there was a what I thought was Jiffy peanut butter, and I go, oh yeah, you see the red label? I go, yes, I do. There was not Jiffy peanut butter ever. I go, really? No, it's called Jif. I go, oh, okay. So those kind of
I get it.
Writing a memoir and remembering what it was. Good luck. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I had some music that I thought looked a certain way and had these little characters. I broke out the music and I looked at it. That they were not Asian characters. They're just people with little hats on, straw hats. I go, okay, got it.
Yeah. So what happened? You were down the farm writing this album, and
Yes, Lowell's on his tour, his solo tour, and he plays this fantastic show by all accounts in the Little Feat Stronghold, which was in Washington D.C. And that evening, went back to the hotel, and he passed away a few hours later. And I got the call, and I was just devastated. I mean, but I had already quit the band. I wanted to produce the record with him. He wasn't keen on that idea, and I said, "Well, then I don't want to be a part of this band, Lowell. If I can't do what I think I ought to be doing too." But what I said was, when you get back off your tour, we're going to finish the album, and beyond that, I don't doubt that most people in the band will want to continue playing music with you. I want to try something else, but let's see where it goes.
yeah,
But he never made it back, and now I'm thrust into the seat of producing the album, and that's not the way I wanted to do it either. So it was a very calamitous time. Richie Hayward was in the hospital. He had was riding his motorcycle. This was his second motorcycle accident. He was going out to see Lowell, and some kids were coming by in a car coming the opposite way and yelled at him, and we're probably just having a great time. And Richie goes, "What?" And right into a stone wall and crushed his right femur, and etc. So on.
mm.
It just was. It was just a nightmare time for us that go around. But we did release that record, um, and we put together an album called Hoy Hoy, which is a double album with a nice color booklet and all these things that Warner's allowed us to do. I wrote a song called Gringo, which is a new song that we put on there. It had David Sanborn, Robin Ford, some really good players, and Little Feat.
Yeah.
Uh, Paul Barrera wrote another tune. Uh, I've got a song that when we record next year for a brand new Little Feat record, I know I'm jumping ahead of the gun here, but I want to, there's a song of Lowell's that nobody's ever heard except on my solo tour that I want to put on that record as
Oh,
well.
good.
So
Well, awesome. You'll have to talk to me again when that comes out so we can promo that everywhere too. That would be fabulous. So, I mean, since that time, you did get the band back together again, as you said, after that rehearsal gig in Los Angeles. Where did it go from there?
we created a record called Let It Roll. And that album actually sold really, really well. The amount of people that were coming to hear us tour, it, we kind of built it, and before long we were playing the same places uh, that I was playing with Jackson Browne, James Taylor, etc. So we were doing well, and then things started to slide a little bit. We were with album-oriented radio, AOR radio, was promoting our albums, and that format started to slide and disappeared right about the time that Keith Richards was coming out with his solo record. He realized it as well. So if you didn't have a hit record like the Doobie Brothers, as I described earlier, or say the Allman Brothers, your path to reaching people over the airwaves was narrowed considerably.
Yeah.
Didn't mean that no one would ever hear you, but it didn't have the same. AOR had a very heavy impact, and I have to this day. I haven't really explored to see what happened to it. I don't know why it fell out of favor with the programmers and whatnot, but it did.
Yeah, right. Maybe because they realised people's attention spans were getting shorter, perhaps over time.
That could very well be true.
Yeah, Bill, you said that Little Feat still sounded like Little Feat. How could you still sound like Little Feat with an entirely different cast?
Well, for starters, we still have Sam Clayton and Kenny Gradney on bass. You still have me on keyboards, which covers a lot of mileage, by the way. Fred Tackett has been with us. Well, he joined us in that latter part, but he played on Time Loves a Hero. I think he might have played on something or another on Dixie Chicken as well. But the way the material is set up, kind of, if you put a slide guitar player in somebody's hand, and um, um, the notion of the slide kind of completes the picture too. I mean, in terms of the way we hear things, but the material, the songs, in and above everything, are the conduit to what makes something sound like Little Feat. It's the songs themselves.
Do you have a particularly favorite Little Feat song? Is there one that's closest to your heart?
Not really. There's just too many of them. But when we were with this newer incarnation of the band, which is Scott Sherrard on guitars and vocals, Tony Leone on drums, the first thing we recorded was Long Distance Love. We were in the middle of this pandemic, right? As was everybody on the planet. And I thought it was a fitting song, not only because of the title, but just uh, the amount of musicianship and the subtlety that it took to play that tune, as opposed to starting off with something like "Oh Atlanta" or "Fat Man in the Bathtub," something was more in your face.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bonnie Raitt heard what we did, and she wrote me, and she said, "I'm listening to this song. I've got tears in my eyes, and it just touched her heart." And it did the same thing to me. I just thought, when you're putting something together that's got a certain sound and a feel, and it touches your head and your heart. I'm not saying it's going to do that with everybody, but it's going to hit a lot of people like that. I do not second guess myself on that type of thing. When it hits a home run with me, uh, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I hear you. So, Bill Payne, Waiting for Columbus.
Yeah.
It's coming up to Waiting for Columbus is coming up to its 50th anniversary. Can you believe that time's gone so quickly?
Yeah, it's like home movies, isn't it? Sometimes, you know.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
And it's being re-released or re-recorded. Share your thoughts around that.
Well, I guess technically this is the 45th year of the release of Waiting for Columbus. It was released. We recorded it in 1977, but we released it in 1978. And we've been touring behind that record. We're with new management in Nashville, Tennessee. They're called Vector Management, and they've got John Hyatt, Emmylou Harris, acts like that. Kent Levitan is amazing manager, not unlike Peter Asher. Brian Penix, who's his day-to-day guy for us, is incredible too. Younger, he's probably young enough to be my son, but he's really, really bright. A lot of people told us over the years that we ought to play Waiting for Columbus, and I thought, I don't know. It just didn't ring true. But when we got this new band together, Scott Sherrard's an amazing singer. I thought, you know what? I think, yeah. What it does is it pitted us against one of the most iconic records we have in terms of the live thing and what people love about Little Feat. And I thought if you're going to do that, you better be pretty damn good. Because if people hear it and it doesn't measure up, it's not a matter of replicating anything. I'm not going to replicate what I did on that record, but I'm going to play it where it's not unrecognizable either, which is what sometimes people, if they're going to grouse about Bob Dylan, they go, "I didn't know what the song was till it was like 3/4 of the way through."
Yeah.
That's Bob. No, we've got it to where Dixie Chicken sounds like Dixie Chicken and Mercenary Territory sounds like Mercenary Territory. But there's areas where we can take off and we start to throw in other influences into solos, whether it's a more of a world beat in a couple of places. Horns playing some certain things in Spanish Moon that they played on the record, but they they're not the same section. There's 3 guys instead of 5. But I asked him to check out a couple of things too, to where we throw more of an Africana thing behind my solo, let's say. So these things are growing like this. I mean, it's just as musicians, that's what Little Feat always did. We took it from the standpoint, Sandy, of the way Miles Davis or John Coltrane would approach a song. You have different versions of it, and a lot of people, and I'm not saying it's wrong, by the way, it's just a style. The Eagles are going to go out and they're going to play Hotel California the way it sounds on the record. They might be doing it different now, but 5 years ago, whenever it was, they were promoting their first concerts out. It sounded like Hotel California, just like the record. So So that's a style. It's not one I prefer to do, and it certainly doesn't fit Little Feat. So
So Waiting for Columbus is celebrating its 45th anniversary. It was recorded in 1978. As a result of that, you've got a super deluxe edition that's out. It's an 8 CD box set, and it really celebrates all the music that you released between 1971 and 77, doesn't it?
Which one is that? Is that the one? It's I can't remember what the name of that record is. There's a couple of them that have all manner of songs in there. The Waiting for Columbus. Oh God, I gave it away. I gave my box set to somebody. Anyway, the box set with Waiting for Columbus has not only additional recordings. There's some bonus tracks, but there's also tracks on it from what we recorded in Manchester, England, and that was without the Tower of Power horn section. So that information was on there. The box set I think you're referring to is it's got most, if not all, the songs Little Feat has ever recorded, and I don't know the name of it, but it really takes you on a journey.
Yeah. So what's in the pipeline for next year to celebrate?
We're going to go back to playing requests, which what we did before we started doing Waiting for Columbus. This way we can dig into all those records you're talking about. And secondly, we're going to be rehearsing songs for a new album. We're also doing something with Sam Clayton that's pretty interesting. It's more of a blues approach, maybe for an EP, let's say.
And talking about attention spans, I think everyone's doing EPs because nobody can sit through a whole album anymore in this crazy world.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person, and more importantly on the product. It's not easy to write a lot of great songs, and when you can, if you're capable of it, and we know it's subjective as to what a great song is. But
Bill, how does your writing compare today to what it was back in the day?
I think it's every bit as adventurous as it was. There's a guy named Charlie Starr, and Charlie works with a group over here in the Atlanta area or Georgia area called Blackberry Smoke. They're a terrific band. I've written, probably 7 or 8 songs with Paul Muldoon, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning poet from Ireland, who teaches used to teach at Oxford. He now teaches at Princeton.
Has your writing changed? The style or the content, has it changed with age, with wisdom?
Yeah, I've written 20 songs with Robert Hunter from the Grateful Dead, which was a very, very good experience. 4 of those songs people have heard, the other 16 people have not. So they'll hear a couple more with Little Feat.
Great.
They'll probably hear quite a few more if I release a solo record. So yeah, my writing has gotten better, and one result of it is a friend of mine named Tom Garnsey, who has a band called the Hooligans. He got me a gift some years ago, and it's right here. I should actually show it to you. It is so we don't confuse people with the word Zoom. This is a Zoom recorder.
I got the same.
There you go. So what this thing allowed me to do is if I'm sitting around going, I'll illustrate it. It's like easier to illustrate than to talking about music's like singing about football, right? So if I'm playing here at the piano.
Oh, awesome. We're going to get a performance. Love it.
Yeah. So if I'm going, I go, wow, what was that? That kind of thing. Even if it's just the melodic intent of it, great. I could play that Zoom, record into that Zoom, and I go back and say, what did I just play 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago? And there it is. So I'm not having to go through any sort of so if I'm mixing and matching genres, I don't have to guess anymore. I just go back, hey, I like where I diverted from the New Orleans thing and went into something a little more, you know, a different sort of melodic intent and a different genre, perhaps. Now I know how to marry those things up. So my writing has taken leaps and bounds
because of all the new technology.
Because of the technology. I'm a photographer, which
Yeah, I didn't mention that. What do you take photos of?
Well, a lot of photos of my cat. No, I had a photo the other day as we were leaving the house. Let's see, I don't know if it will translate for you or not. This is just on an iPhone, but I still take photos of things. But this was as we were leaving the house to go up to town. There was a family of
I got it. Yeah, no, I got it.
A bighorn sheep. I live out in the mountains, so where I live in Montana is this.
Oh, look at all the snow already. Amazing.
Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
Yes, we got the
mountains.
mountains.
How stunning. Oh, Bill, you're so lucky. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's very fortunate. So
yeah.
With writing and with still recording and touring with Little Feat, all that's good. And having a place like this to write, we've got an addition to the house. It's
awesome. So you'd have to say that life today is better for you than it's ever been.
Yes. Yeah, my wife Polly is. God, I met her 13 years ago.
Newlyweds.
She's 26 years younger than I am. She
Perfect.
was
Keeps you young.
34, and I was 60. I'm 73. She's 47. And but she was building the architecture for this house. We're building back of the one I'm sitting in. I go, well, when did you become an architect? She goes, well, I'm a graphic designer, so I know how to measure things, and we got a good builder. And it's just amazing what people can do when they are given a chance to do something.
Absolutely. Bill Payne, two things I want to ask you to finish off with, and you've been so generous with your time. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Firstly, which song would you like us to go out on? We've talked about several songs, so not one of those. Perhaps one that we haven't mentioned that you'd like my audience to hear.
Okay. Let's play one. This has a couple of guys. I want to include the Doobie Brothers on something with a collaboration with us. It's called Red Streamliner. And the guys that are singing the backgrounds are Pat Simmons and Mike McDonald. And when I invited them to sing on the tune, they told me to go, well, we're both in the Dewey Brothers, but we'd never sung with each other before, like in the same studio. They probably sang off of each other later, like overdubbing against each other. I said, well, let's introduce you to one another. So I think that's a good song. That'd be a good one.
Fabulous. We'll have a listen to that. You're not coming to Australia next year to Blues Fest with the Doobie Brothers, are you?
I keep pushing to come down there. We've been to Byron Bay many times.
Yeah.
I'll push again. Like I said, I've been there 10 times. It'd be nice to see Shane again soon, and say hello to you in person.
So. Absolutely. Well, we'll have to stay in touch. That would be great. If you could come down here, Australia would love to see you again. What were you doing here when you spent so much time both with Shane and Sam C?
We were. There was a record I was producing, and there was a song that I didn't play on, but it was called Common Ground. So Oceania was the record that I was involved in, and I mean Shane is a spot on. He's just a wonderful writer. Da, 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 da. I can't think of the name of the tune. It's about Australian history.
They're all about Australian history, aren't they? Those Goanna songs, really.
That's true. That's true.
And with Sam C?
Yeah, Sam was on it. What a wonderful player he is too.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
I was in Sydney. I was at the Siebel Townhouse.
The best place to be.
Yeah, we were staying down there. One time I was there, and Davy Johnstone got in touch. Says, "You got to meet Elton." And I go, "Oh, okay." And I got there. And it was the second time I was trying to say hello to Elton John, and it didn't happen. I said, "You know what? I don't really need to meet him. I just was going to say, I could just tell him I said thank you for all the kind words. That's fine."
Oh, gorgeous. Bill Payne, thank you for your time today. What a joy to chat with you. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. I know my audience is just going to be so excited to hear from you. We look forward to what comes next from Little Feat and from you personally, both on everybody else's songs and hopefully with a solo record coming out not too soon.
No, thank you so much again, Sandy. It was a pleasure and honor to get to talk to you as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll send you a link to when this is all cut up so you could possibly share with your fan base. And let's stay in touch. Keep pushing those doobies to come back to Byron next year. I'd love to catch up. And if you're going to be doing stuff next year, let's just do this all again. Perhaps I won't take quite so much of your time.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you. All the very, very best to you. Thank you really from the bottom of my heart, Bill, for your time and for all the awesome music.
Oh, thanks again, Sandy. Take care.
Bye now.